You know, sorry, Mark, I was also actually going to ask if South Africa is a known place for procurement of arms. Because also former minister, Mr. Sariki, has been speaking. He was with the defense minister. I'm sure you must have heard his comment on that. And he said, well, to the best of his knowledge, well, South Africa is not one of those countries where you go procure arms. So when we say we were actually taking such amount of money to get arms from South Africa, was it were we on transit, or was that our destination to get those arms? And Nigerians would want to know if the companies are really in South Africa.
Really, you know, Demola Seriki is a very good friend of mine, a good friend and brother, and I have nothing but immense respect for him. But frankly speaking, I'm amazed that he would suggest that South Africa is not a natural place on the African continent for people to procure arms. There are some countries that you can get things, places like Israel, places like, in fact, all over the developed world. You know, you have arms dealers, legitimate ones, you have markets, you have places you go where you can procure arms safely, high quality, good quality stuff, not the sort of things you might get in some banana republic. And of course, South Africa is a primary destination for such transactions, just as other developed nations throughout the world are. There's nothing unusual about that. It happens all the time. Now, one of the things we mustn't do is play politics when we're in the middle of a war. When it comes to procurement of arms for our people, every action that the government takes, particularly the actions of the security agencies, should not be subjected to some kind of scrutiny, yes, but not this sort of attitude that everything we're doing must be wrong. Of course, arms can be bought from South African companies, not necessarily the government, but South African companies. We will buy arms from anywhere in order to ensure that our boys have what it takes.
So you just observed, sorry to bother you here, but you just observed that there's been some form of frosty relationship between the two countries after the rebasing of our economy. So that would have actually given us the inkling not to go to South Africa. It's as if, well, Israel is going to America, or America. You look at the competition.
With the South African government, you're dealing with private firms that happen to have their goods in South Africa, or they ship their goods in from elsewhere to South Africa, and then the buyer comes there to pay and carry the stuff back to Nigeria. So really, you don't have much of a choice, because the company you're dealing with probably resides and works in South Africa. But what I'm saying is this. Let me give you another example of a situation where opposition figures will play politics with such a thing. There was this issue of pastor research, of which I'm sure we'll come to. And the facts are clear there. But just to jump it a little bit, I mean, where you have two key opposition figures, again, I won't mention names, it's unnecessary, and they know who they are. Everybody knows who they are. We'll go to the House of Commons in the United Kingdom and allege before the House of Commons that key members, that the president of the Christian Association of Nigeria is one, a Boko Haram sponsor, the main Boko Haram sponsor. And secondly, he collected 50 billion naira. He was given 50 billion naira by the President of the Federal Republic. That is, Uri Sejafo was given 50 billion naira by President Goodluck Jonathan to fund Boko Haram. And he was also given a private jet. These things were said to the House of Commons in the United Kingdom by two leading opposition figures. And when this sort of thing now happens, and it happens to be that it is Pastor Uri Sejafo's jet that was used for this transaction, and of course, you can see the narrative. It's like, oh, this is evidence of what we have been saying all along. And nothing could be further from the truth. So what I'm saying is that, yes, we need to explain these things, but let's not play politics with the lives of our people. And let's not drag the name of key figures in this country in the mud simply in the name of politics. The security agencies are doing their best. Our military are doing their best. Our men of God are doing their best. Let's try and understand there are some things we just don't joke with. And these are some of those things.
Well, you've talked about the closeness of South African president to opposition figures. At the same time, you've tried to differentiate between the two different arms deals. You said the first one, mistakes were made in that one. It was a covert operation that didn't quite go well. The second one, however, leaves you asking questions as to what exactly the South African government could be up to, with what exactly is happening. Do you think that they are tying the two of them together? Perhaps the companies involved are linked. And does it also scare you? Because you've said that we can actually take cash out of the country to do, I mean, government agencies can.
Anybody can.
Anybody can. I mean, but you must declare that cash when you enter another country. Does it also scare you that in the process of doing government business, we could actually be doing private business as well?
In this particular case, I have absolutely no doubt that there was no private business going on. Because I did my research on this. This particular transaction, that is the $9.3 million, the cash, was born or what took place as a consequence of sheer necessity and desperation on the part of our security agencies. Why? Because our boys were being killed, our innocent civilians were being killed, and our soldiers were being killed, and they were not properly armed. All the arms that various governments had promised to sell to us and private companies, there was literally an unofficial embargo. The Israelis would have supplied us with arms. The Americans categorically told them not to do so. And this was basically the narrative throughout the world. So our soldiers didn't have the necessary equipment. So they needed to do. So I think this was a legitimate operation.
Yes.
But coming to it, it's a very good question, because you see, if you tie the second one, as far as I'm concerned, shows the hand of the South Africans clearly. The first one, I have my own views of what really happened. And what I believe happened was that somebody went out of their way, having given the necessary assurances on the South African side that, listen, you've been doing this for some time, and I have no doubt that this was not the first transaction that took place. It's been happening for some time. Yes, we will give you the clearance to come and purchase your arms because we know you need them, but something went wrong, and they decided to literally renege on that agreement and expose our people and bring our government and our nation into disrepute before the international community in order to discredit us, and in order to ensure that we didn't get the arms that we so desperately needed. Now, if you tie that to the fact that the Americans refused to categorize and label Boko Haram as a terrorist organization up until after the time they killed almost 15,000 Nigerians. That was end of last year or the beginning of this year. They simply said, we will not call them a terrorist organization for reasons best known to themselves. They only did so at the beginning of this year. If you tie that with the fact that they would not allow us to buy arms, they reneged on all their satellite agreements, and they will give us pictures of all these. They didn't help us at all. And I'm saying this as an individual that is privy to some of these things. It shows a pattern of behavior. There's far more to all this than meets the eye. But the good news is that we took the initiative. This government and the NSA's office and the security agencies, all of them together, took the initiative. Said, look, whatever it takes, we will send cash, we will transfer money, we will arm our boys, we will prosecute this war, and we will defeat the enemy. What doesn't help is if elements of the opposition decide that, look, we'll play politics with this and we'll cast aspersions on the character of everybody that's involved in trying to save our country from Boko Haram.
Well, let us remove the opposition from
Sure.
this, because I'm sure that they can also, they have their own questions to answer.
Sure.
But let us look at this, as Nigerians watching the scenario. As you rightly pointed out, it was a covert operation, the $9.3 million. Perhaps we should never have known anything about it. And maybe we would never have known anything about it but for the South African government or people there blowing the whistle.
Well, by the time, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but by the time intelligence agencies begin to blow the whistle on one another and expose each, perhaps we should also begin to talk about some of the things the South Africans themselves have been doing. And certainly if I were in this government, and if our Minister of Information or any other key position in this government, I would have gone on the offensive with the South Africans over this issue, because it's clear to me that their objective is to demean Nigeria and to expose some of the things that we're doing, which are perfectly legitimate, but which brings us, raises questions and makes our people begin to wonder what.
And a lot of people wonder why we haven't done that. It's been close to 3 weeks now since the $9.3 million scandal broke. A lot of people will ask, why haven't we done that? Do we have a lot more to hide? Because as I asked you earlier, how are we so sure? Let us say that, that they're telling the truth. $9.3 million was meant to buy arms, and let us take that as the whole truth. Absolutely. But then, how do we then know that other people have not been doing this in the name of government?
All right, let me put this to you. Mopek, because one of the problems that we have as a people, I think, is this issue of self-hate and we just don't trust each other, understandably, because of what has happened over so many years. Look, listen, if it were the other way around, and the South African people, say 20,000, 35,000 of them had been killed over a period of by the most extreme terrorist organization Africa has ever known, And there was literally an unofficial arms embargo against them throughout the world. They couldn't procure arms. And they now send a plane load of cash to buy arms from Nigeria. Somehow the Nigerian security agencies say, oh, we don't know anything about this, reneged on all the agreements and exposed them and said, this is evidence of your government's corruption and money laundering activities and shady deals and private transactions and the president of Canada and so on and so forth. As a South African in that situation, I'm sure most of them, 90% of them will say, listen, don't be ridiculous. We are fighting a war here. We need these arms. We will believe in our government. We will trust our government. And these arms will be procured because it's necessary. And we choose to accept what our government is telling us. Now, it's perfectly right and proper for you and others to raise these questions. I have raised them myself. In my own mind, I am satisfied that there is no way that money was going for anything other than arms. And if other transactions have taken place, I'm pretty certain that they have, I have no doubt that it went for the right purpose, it did the right thing, and it was to help our people fight this war effort. Look at the way the tide has turned now, because we've taken the initiative and we're finding ways of raising money, sending money out to procure arms for our soldiers. Now the Boko Haram thing is residing, thankfully, and we're making good progress. Up until the time that we took that initiative, it wasn't so. So I think we should
would we say that we exhausted, because you said that the American government put a ban on us, it's difficult for us, and none of that came out until this $9.3 million problem broke.
Yeah.
None of that had come out before now, that it had been difficult for Nigerian government to procure arms. What we had gotten was that Nigeria was trying to procure arms. In fact, the federal government had made a requisition to the Senate, the National Assembly, asking for $1 billion to buy arms to equip the Nigerian military. We did not think that that money was going to be going, in piecemeal to.
It doesn't. The money that was used, I can tell you clearly that the money that was used for for this particular transaction does not necessarily have to be that money that was applied for from the National Assembly. I mean, like I said earlier, $10 million is not that much when it comes to buying sophisticated arms and helicopters. So the NSA's office has their own budget. The security have their own budget.
Let me quickly land on my question then.
Sure.
The question will be, did we totally exhaust other opportunities? Because it came out at the UN General Assembly, Security, the General Assembly, that we had a meeting with Russia. Foreign Affairs Minister said we're going to, put Nigeria's interests first, and whoever it is can help us in this fight will be our partners.
Absolutely.
Did we totally exhaust all other partners, all other possible partners in this fight against terrorism before we went down this route?
First of all, you would need to go down this route anyway, because you don't want to rely on either the Russians or the Americans or anybody. So you do what you have to do to help your army to win the war. That is number one. But I agree with you 100%. My own view about this, and I've stated this view to key officials in the government, is that it's time for us to begin to review our whole relationship with the Americans in terms of relying on them so much. Because in our time of need, as far as I am aware, and as far as I'm concerned, they did not do nearly enough to help us battle this. I have said it over and over again to those that matter in this government, that it's time for us to begin to talk to the Russians, to talk to the Chinese, to supply what we need in order to be able to prosecute our own war. And, this government is not infallible. I mean, they've made a number of errors and mistakes. And I'm in the PDP and I'm proud to be back there. But that doesn't mean to say I agree with everything that the federal government has done. It would be absurd for me to say I agree with everything. They've made numerous errors. And I think that it's time for us to advise them and counsel them. And I've been doing so. That, look, you need to review this relationship. As far as I'm concerned, the Americans were the ones that were behind this whole process of the cash thing. It was exposed. It was a very carefully orchestrated attempt to, one, ensure we didn't get the arms we needed. The South Africans were party to it. They joined those that didn't want us to get the arms. There's a systematic attempt to undermine us, to ensure we don't have the necessary equipment to prosecute this war. And one has to ask the question why our natural allies would do this. This is just my own